Today, we're diving deep into the Vatican's secret demon classification system, a shadowy and carefully organized list of evil spirits that most people never hear about. Although demons and exorcisms have become popular thanks to movies like The Pope's Exorcist and the Conjuring films, the Catholic Church's real system for tracking these entities is much older and way more detailed than anything Hollywood shows us. This system is a carefully guarded collection of centuries' worth of real exorcism cases that have been verified, documented, and cataloged by church officials. Vatican exorcists have actually documented over 200 different demonic entities, each one with specific ranks, special abilities, preferred methods of attack, and exact procedures needed to banish them. But here's what makes this even more interesting. The Vatican doesn't just list these demons randomly. They've organized them into a strict hierarchy, almost like a military chain of command for the supernatural world. The Church has spent over 400 years building what essentially amounts to a supernatural intelligence database. They know which demons work alone and which ones command armies of lesser spirits. They know which ones target specific types of people, which ones prefer certain locations, and which ones can only be defeated using particular relics or prayers. This isn't just ancient superstition. This is an active, ongoing system that Vatican exorcists use right now, today. When they encounter cases of suspected demonic possession, before we go deeper into this incredible system, I'm curious, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your country or city in the comments below. I love seeing how far this knowledge reaches. What makes this classification system so incredibly detailed and organized? What are the different types of demons the Church officially recognizes, and how do they rank them? What does this secret knowledge tell us about what the Vatican, and perhaps, most importantly, why do they keep this information so heavily guarded? Join us as we uncover all the mysteries and secrets of the Church's forbidden demonic registry. To understand why the Vatican has such an incredibly detailed system for classifying demons, we need to look back at the Church's long and often bloody history of fighting what they firmly believe is real, active evil in the world. Vatican-appointed exorcists around the globe. The main book that contains these classifications is called which was first officially published in 1614 under Pope Paul V, but here's what most Catholics, and even many priests, don't know. There are heavily classified sections of this book that regular clergy never see, sections that require special Vatican authorization even to read. The Vatican's Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith, which used to be called the Holy Office of the Inquisition, before they changed the name to sound less intimidating, has been keeping meticulously detailed records of demonic encounters for over 400 years. They document specific demon names, their behavioral patterns, their known weaknesses, the exact prayers or rituals that worked to banish them, how long the exorcism took, what physical manifestations occurred, and even details about the possessed person's background that might have made them vulnerable in the first place. These records are stored in the Vatican Apostolic Archives, previously known as the Vatican Secret Archives, in a restricted section, but also a sworn oath of secrecy from anyone who accesses the materials. According to former Vatican insiders, this section contains over 35 miles of shelving filled with documents, and a significant portion deals with supernatural encounters that the Church has investigated and verified. If you're finding this as fascinating as I am, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We explore the Church's hidden mysteries every week here at Sigil Sanctum. The development of this system didn't happen overnight, especially the infamous Malleus Maleficarum, written by Heinrich Kramer in 1487. But the Vatican took the concept much further than anyone before them. They created what essentially amounts to a military-style intelligence network for tracking supernatural threats across the entire Catholic world. When reports came in from different countries, different centuries even, Vatican scholars began noticing patterns. The same demon names would appear in cases from Spain in the 1400s and then show up again in reports from South America in the 1600s, exhibiting identical behaviors and responding to the same banishment techniques. The real turning point came during the Black Death in the 1300s. As the plague swept across Europe, reports of demonic activity increased dramatically. People were desperate, terrified, and dying in massive numbers, which the Church believed created ideal conditions for demonic interference. Vatican records from this period show a massive spike in reported possessions, and church officials realized they were dealing with something much more organized than random supernatural events. They started noticing that certain types of demons appeared during times of mass death, others during periods of social upheaval, and still others seemed to target specific types of people, children, pregnant women, or those already weakened by illness. By the time of the European witch trials in the 1500s and 1600s, Vatican exorcists had already begun developing a sophisticated classification system. They categorized demons not just by their power level, but by their preferred methods of attack, their apparent goals, and the specific countermeasures needed to deal with them. What makes this even more remarkable is that this information was being collected from all over the Catholic world. Reports were coming in from missionaries in the Americas, from monasteries in Eastern Europe, from colonial outposts in Asia and Africa. The Vatican was essentially running a global supernatural intelligence operation. One of the most revealing insights into this system comes from Father Gabriel Amorth, who served as the Vatican's chief exorcist and performed over 70,000 exorcisms. He was officially appointed by the Vatican and had direct access to their classified materials. He publicly confirmed that the Church maintains detailed files on specific demonic entities, and that certain demon names appear repeatedly across different cases, sometimes separated by centuries or continents. According to Amorth, the Vatican has identified demons that seem to specialize in different types of attacks. Some focus on physical possession, others on psychological torment, and the most dangerous ones can actually command multiple lesser demons simultaneously. Where it gets really interesting, when a new case of suspected possession is reported, Vatican exorcists consult their archives to identify patterns that match previous cases. They look at the victim's background, the specific symptoms being exhibited, the type of supernatural phenomena occurring, and they use this information to determine which classification of demon they're likely dealing with, going all the way back to the early Christian period, with some references to cases involving the apostles themselves. But the real systematic scientific approach to demonology started in the medieval era, when monasteries began keeping detailed written records of everything that happened within their walls. By the Renaissance, the Vatican had created what amounts to the world's most comprehensive supernatural database, complete with cross-references between different types of demons, their known associates, their preferred methods of attack, the saints or prayers that work best against each specific type, and even seasonal patterns of when certain demons are most active. This knowledge hasn't just been sitting in musty archives gathering dust. It's been continuously updated and passed down through generations of Vatican-trained experts. The Church currently has over 400 officially appointed exorcists worldwide, and every single one of them has been trained using this classification system. They learn not just the general ritual of exorcism, but the specific variations needed for different types of demonic encounters. It's like having a field manual for supernatural warfare, and it's still being actively used and updated today. Now, let's get into the actual structure of how the Vatican organizes these demonic entities, because this is where things get really fascinating and honestly pretty disturbing. The Church doesn't just have a random list of demon names. They've created a complex hierarchy that reads like a supernatural military organization chart. According to Vatican sources and leaked documents from former exorcists, the classification system is built around 3 main categories, but within those categories are dozens of subcategories and special designations. At the top of the hierarchy are what the Vatican calls the princes of hell, or infernal princes. These are the most powerful demonic entities, and according to church records, there are only about 12 to 15 demons that qualify for this classification. These aren't just powerful demons. These are entities that the Vatican believes can command entire armies of lesser demons, can manipulate reality on a large scale, and can possess multiple people simultaneously across great distances. Names in this category include some that you might recognize from popular culture, but also many that the Church keeps completely secret. What makes this category so dangerous is that Vatican protocol requires approval from the Pope himself before any exorcist can attempt to confront an infernal prince. The second tier is called legion commanders or principalities, and this is where the numbers start getting scary. The Vatican has documented over 70 demons in this category. These entities are powerful enough to possess multiple people at once, but usually within a limited geographic area. They can create what the Church calls demonic outbreaks, situations where an entire family, school, or small community becomes affected simultaneously. Vatican records show that Legion commanders often work in groups of 3 or 4, and they have specific territorial preferences. Some are documented as preferring urban areas, others target rural communities, and some seem to focus on religious institutions like monasteries or seminaries. The third and largest category is what the Vatican terms common demons or lesser infernal entities. This includes over 120 documented demons that typically focus on individual possession cases. But here's what's really interesting. Even within this common category, the Vatican has created dozens of specialized subcategories. There are demons that specifically target children, others that focus on pregnant women, some that seem drawn to people with mental illness, and others that prefer to attack people who are already physically weakened by disease or injury. But the classification system goes even deeper than just these 3 main tiers. The Vatican has created what they call specialist designations for demons that don't fit neatly into the standard categories. There are tempter demons that focus on psychological manipulation rather than possession, poltergeist entities that primarily affect physical objects and locations, and what the Church grimly refers to as harvester demons, entities that seem to appear specifically during times of mass death, like plagues, wars, or natural disasters. Each classification comes with its own identification protocols. Vatican exorcists are trained to recognize specific signs that indicate which type of demon they're dealing with before they even begin the exorcism process. For infernal princes, the signs include reality distortions, multiple simultaneous possessions, and what the Church calls blasphemous miracles, supernatural events that mock or pervert genuine religious miracles. Legion commanders are identified by their territorial behavior, their tendency to possess people in groups, and their ability to coordinate attacks across multiple victims. Common demons each have their own signature behaviors, preferred possession, methods, and specific weaknesses that can be exploited during exorcism. The Vatican has also developed a color-coded system for their internal documentation. Red classifications are for infernal princes and require immediate Vatican notification. Orange classifications are for Legion commanders and require regional church authority approval. Green classifications are for standard possession cases that local exorcists can handle using basic protocols. What makes this system even more comprehensive is that the Vatican cross-references each demon classification with geographic data, historical patterns, and what they call vulnerability factors in potential victims. They've mapped out which types of demons are most active in different parts of the world, which ones seem to appear more frequently during certain times of the year, and which ones are most likely to target people with specific backgrounds or life circumstances. It's not just a list of demons, it's a complete strategic intelligence system for supernatural warfare. Understanding the powers and abilities that the Vatican has documented for each classification of demon is crucial, because this is where we see just how seriously the Church takes these encounters and how detailed their knowledge really is. This isn't vague superstition. These are specific, documented abilities that Vatican exorcists claim to have witnessed and recorded over centuries of encounters, starting with the infernal princes, honestly terrifying in their scope and power. These entities are believed to have what the Church calls reality manipulation, abilities they can allegedly alter physical laws within a limited area, create mass hallucinations that affect multiple people simultaneously, and even manipulate time perception to make exorcism sessions seem to last for days when only hours have passed. Vatican records describe cases where infernal princes have possessed entire families across multiple generations, with the demonic influence lying dormant for decades, before suddenly activating in descendants who had no knowledge of their families' supernatural history. But perhaps most disturbing is what the Vatican calls divine mockery, the ability of infernal princes to create corrupted versions of religious miracles. Church records describe cases where these entities have caused false stigmata that bleeds backwards into the body instead of out, created religious visions that slowly drive the recipient insane, and even produced fake religious ecstasies that feel genuine to the victim but actually serve to corrupt their faith from within. The Vatican has documented 7 different infernal princes that can allegedly manifest physical forms visible to multiple witnesses simultaneously, and 3 that can apparently communicate through electronic devices, television broadcasts, and even modern technology like smartphones and computers. The most disturbing documented ability of infernal princes is what the Church calls legion summoning, the power to call forth and command multiple lesser demons simultaneously. Vatican records describe cases where confronting a single infernal prince has resulted in battles against dozens of lesser entities, with the exorcism becoming less like a religious ritual and more like a supernatural siege. These cases can last for weeks or even months, requiring multiple exorcists working in shifts, and often result in the destruction of the physical location where the possession occurred. Moving to the Legion commanders, their abilities are focused more on coordination and territorial control. These demons are documented as being able to possess multiple people within a geographic area simultaneously, but they do it strategically. Vatican records show that Legion commanders often start by possessing one primary victim, then use that person as a base to spread their influence to family members, friends, and neighbors. They create what the Church calls infection networks, where the demonic influence spreads like a supernatural disease through communities. Legion commanders have several documented abilities that make them particularly dangerous for exorcists to deal with. They can apparently share sensory information between all their possessed victims, meaning that if an exorcist approaches one possessed person, all the others in the network immediately know about it. They can coordinate attacks across multiple victims, creating situations where exorcists find themselves surrounded by possessed individuals who are all acting in perfect synchronization. Perhaps most troubling, Vatican records show that Legion commanders can transfer their consciousness between victims during exorcism attempts, essentially playing a deadly game of supernatural hide-and-seek that can stretch exorcism sessions. Over days or weeks, the Church has documented specific Legion commanders that seem to specialize in different types of communities. There are 3 documented entities that specifically target religious communities, like convents or monasteries, creating what historical records call demonic outbreaks that can affect entire religious orders, with Vatican records showing cases where Legion commanders have possessed parents first, then use them to systematically possess their children over a period of months or years. For common demons, the abilities are more focused and individual, but they're still far from simple, according to Vatican documentation. Each subcategory of common demon has its own specialized abilities. Tempter demons are documented as being able to read and manipulate human psychology with frightening precision. They can apparently access their victims' deepest fears, shameful memories, and secret desires, then use this information to systematically break down the person's psychological defenses. Vatican records describe cases where tempter demons have driven victims to suicide, not through possession, but through months or years of psychological torment that appears to come from the victim's own thoughts. The Vatican claims these entities can make themselves appear as imaginary friends, invisible playmates, or even deceased relatives to children. Often, over a period of years, Church records show that children affected by these demons often begin exhibiting knowledge they shouldn't have, speaking in languages they've never learned, knowing details about dead people they've never met, or having detailed knowledge about adult topics they've never been exposed to. The Vatican has also documented what they call environmental demons, entities that don't possess people directly but instead infest locations and objects. These demons can allegedly manipulate electronic devices, cause temperature fluctuations, create sounds and smells that have no physical source, and even affect the physical structure of buildings. Church records describe cases where environmental demons have caused houses to develop cracks in specific patterns, made doors and windows open and close on their own. Makes the Vatican's documentation of these abilities so comprehensive is that they don't just record what the demons can do. They also document the specific countermeasures that work against each type of ability. For every documented demonic power, the Church has developed specific prayers, rituals, blessed objects, or saints that can be invoked to counter or neutralize that particular ability. It's like having a supernatural field manual with not just intelligence about the enemy, but also detailed battle tactics for confronting each type of threat. But here's where we need to step back and look at. Demonic entities reveal something profound about how the Catholic Church views the nature of evil itself. And honestly, it raises some uncomfortable questions about power, control, and the human need to make sense of chaos. On one level, during the Middle Ages, Catholic scholars believed that all knowledge, including knowledge about evil, could be systematically organized and understood. This was the same mindset that produced massive theological works like Thomas Aquinas's Summa Theologica, which attempted to catalog and explain every aspect of Christian doctrine. The demon classification system is essentially the Church applying this same organizational approach to the forces of darkness, but there's something deeper going on here. By creating such a detailed hierarchy of demonic entities, the Vatican is essentially claiming that evil itself is not chaotic or random, it's organized. This is a remarkably specific theological position. Most religious traditions view evil as fundamentally chaotic, destructive, and opposed to order. But the Catholic Church's classification system suggests that they believe evil has its own internal logic, its own chain of command, its own strategic goals. This raises some fascinating and troubling questions about what the Church really believes about the nature of good and evil. If demons are as organized and hierarchical as the Vatican claims, then evil starts to look less like a corrupting force and more like a competing kingdom with its own government, military, and administrative structure. In a way, the Church's demon classification system makes evil look almost legitimate. It's not chaotic destruction, it's organized opposition. There's also a psychological element to consider here. Humans have a deep psychological need to categorize and control the things that frighten them. By creating such a detailed classification system for demons, the uncontrollable, controllable. If you can name something, classify it, and develop specific procedures for dealing with it, then it becomes less terrifying and more manageable. But this approach comes with serious risks. When you systematize evil to this degree, you run the risk of making it seem routine, predictable, and ultimately defeatable. The Vatican's classification system suggests that demonic encounters are not mysterious, terrifying brushes with ultimate evil, but rather technical problems that can be solved by applying the correct protocols. This turns exorcism from a desperate spiritual battle into something that looks more like supernatural tech support. There's also the question of power and authority. By claiming to have such detailed, systematic knowledge about the forces of darkness, the Vatican is positioning itself as the ultimate authority on supernatural matters. They have more complete knowledge about the nature of evil than anyone else in the world. This level of claimed expertise gives the Church enormous power over people who believe they might be dealing with supernatural threats. The classification system also reflects some uncomfortable assumptions about human vulnerability. The Vatican's documented focus on demons that target specific types of people, children, pregnant women, the mentally ill, the physically weak, suggests a worldview where certain people are inherently more susceptible to evil influence. This can easily slide into victim-blaming territory, where people experiencing supernatural phenomena are seen as having somehow made themselves. Approach to evil says about the Church's relationship with mystery and faith. Traditional Christian theology emphasizes that God's ways are mysterious and beyond human understanding. But the Vatican's demon classification system suggests that evil, at least, is completely understandable and catalogable. This creates a strange theological imbalance, where the Church claims to have more systematic knowledge about hell than about heaven. The danger in all of this is that when you make evil seem too organized, too predictable, and too manageable, you risk losing sight of what makes it truly dangerous. Real evil, whether supernatural or human, is often most destructive precisely because it is unpredictable. Procedures and protocols. By creating such a detailed classification system, the Vatican might be giving people false confidence that they can understand and control forces that are fundamentally beyond, have portrayed Vatican exorcism and demonic classification. Because the contrast between what we see in movies and what the Vatican actually claims to do is absolutely fascinating and reveals just how much the entertainment industry has both helped and hurt public understanding of the Church's real practices. The most recent and probably most accurate portrayal we've seen is in the 2023 film, The Pope's Exorcist, starring Russell Crowe as Father Gabriele Amor. What makes this movie particularly interesting is that it's based on the real-life Vatican exorcist we discussed earlier, and the filmmakers actually consulted with current Vatican officials during production. The movie shows several elements that align remarkably well with what we know about the Vatican's actual classification system. In the film, we see Father Amurth consulting detailed Vatican records before approaching a case, which matches what the real Amurth described about using historical precedents to identify demon types. The movie also shows the Vatican having specific protocols for different levels of demonic encounters, requiring higher church authority approval for more dangerous cases. This directly reflects the Vatican's real red, orange, yellow classification system we discussed earlier, and behavioral patterns that can be researched and predicted, which is exactly what the Vatican's classification system is designed to do. But here's where it gets really interesting. The movie shows Father Amurth dealing with what appears to be a Legion commander-level demon, an entity that can possess multiple people and has a specific historical connection to a particular location. The film depicts the demon as having been previously encountered and documented by church historians, and shows Amurth using this historical knowledge to develop a specific strategy for the exorcism. This isn't just Hollywood drama. This is almost exactly how the Vatican's classification system is supposed to work in practice. However, the real Vatican approach is much more methodical and less dramatically cinematic. Real Vatican exorcisms based on their classification system can take weeks or months of preparation, research before the actual ritual begins. The movie compresses this into a more exciting timeline. But the underlying methodology is surprisingly accurate. The Conjuring film series classification principles, though it focuses more on the American approach to demonology rather than specifically Vatican methods. These films show supernatural investigators, Ed and Lorraine Warren, consulting historical records, identifying specific demonic entities by name. While the Warrens weren't Vatican exorcists, their methodology mirrors the Church's classification approach, the idea that different demons require different strategies based on documented historical encounters. What's particularly interesting about The Conjuring 2 is how it portrays the demon Valak as having a specific historical identity, documented appearances across different time periods, and particular behavioral patterns that can be researched and understood. This reflects the Vatican's approach to treating demons not as random supernatural chaos, but as specific entities with documented histories and predictable behaviors. The film even shows religious authorities consulting archives and historical records to identify the entity. Portrayals also create some significant misconceptions about how the Vatican's system actually works. Movies tend to show individual exorcists working alone against powerful demons, when Vatican protocols for higher classification demons actually require teams of exorcists, often working in shifts over extended periods. Films also tend to show exorcisms as single dramatic confrontations, when the Vatican's approach based on their classification system is much more like a prolonged military campaign with multiple phases, strategic retreats, and coordinated attacks. One of the biggest differences between Hollywood and Vatican reality is the role of secrecy. Movies often show church authorities being reluctant to get involved or trying to cover up supernatural encounters. The church actively wants to document and study demonic encounters. They're not trying to hide these cases. They're trying to gather as much intelligence as possible to improve their classification system and develop better countermeasures for future encounters. The Netflix series, The Haunting of Hill House and The Haunting of Bly Manor, while not specifically about Vatican exorcism, actually demonstrates some principles that align with church classification thinking. These shows portray supernatural entities as having specific historical identities, particular behavioral patterns, and documented methods of interaction with the living world. The idea that ghosts and demons can be understood through research, historical investigation, and pattern recognition is very much in line with Vatican methodology, but perhaps the most accurate recent portrayal of systematic supernatural investigation is in the TV series Evil on CBS and Paramount+. This show follows a team that investigates supernatural claims for the Catholic Church, and it demonstrates many aspects of how the Vatican's classification system would work in practice. The team consults historical records, looks for patterns across different cases, tries to identify specific entities through research and develops targeted approaches based on documented precedents. While the show is fictional, its portrayal of methodical look more successful and reliable than it might actually be. Hollywood needs clear victories and defeated villains, but the Vatican's own records suggest that their classification system doesn't always work perfectly. Some demons don't fit neatly into their categories, some cases require improvisation beyond established protocols, and some encounters end without clear resolution. The cultural impact of these portrayals has been enormous. Public interest in Vatican exorcism has increased dramatically since The Exorcist in 1973, and each new film or series brings more attention to Catholic demonology. But this popular interest has also created pressure on the Vatican to be more open about their practices, which conflicts with their traditional secrecy around supernatural matters. The Church finds itself in the strange position of having their secret knowledge become a subject of popular entertainment. Demon classification system as a whole, what we're really seeing is one of the most ambitious attempts in human history to systematically understand. But it also reveals something fundamental about human nature and our relationship with fear, power, and the limits of knowledge. The Vatican's approach represents humanity's ancient desire to make sense of chaos, to find patterns in randomness, and to gain some measure of control over forces that seem completely beyond our control. For over 400 years, gathering reports from around the world, analyzing patterns, and developing strategic responses to what they believe are organized supernatural threats. But this systematic approach to cataloging evil also reflects some of our deepest psychological needs as human beings. We need to believe that even the most terrifying, incomprehensible forces can be understood, categorized, and ultimately defeated through the right knowledge and techniques. The Vatican's classification system offers the comforting illusion that chaos has an underlying order, that evil follows predictable rules, and that expertise and proper procedures can protect us from the darkness. Yet there's something profoundly unsettling about the implications of this system. If the Vatican is correct, and evil really is as organized, hierarchical, and strategic as their classification suggests, then we're not dealing with random supernatural chaos. We're dealing with what amounts to a parallel supernatural government, with its own military structure, intelligence operations, and long-term strategic goals. This makes evil seem less like a corrupting force and more like a competing civilization that has been secretly waging war against humanity for millennia. The psychological impact of believing in such an organized supernatural threat is enormous. It means that every unexplained event, every piece of bad luck, this worldview can provide comfort to people who need to believe that their suffering has meaning and purpose. But it can also create paranoia and the sense that we're all pawns in a cosmic war that we barely tend. Perhaps most importantly, the Vatican's classification system raises profound questions about the nature of authority and expertise when it comes to the supernatural. By claiming such detailed, systematic knowledge about the forces of darkness, the Church positions itself as the ultimate authority on matters that are, by definition, beyond normal human experience. This gives religious institutions enormous power over people who believe they might be experiencing supernatural phenomena. But it also creates the risk of false confidence in areas where uncertainty might be more honest and ultimately more helpful. The real lesson of the Vatican's demon classification system might not be about demons at all. It might be about us. It reveals our deep need to believe that someone, somewhere, has answers to the most terrifying questions about existence. It shows our willingness to accept systematic explanations for chaotic experiences and our desire to believe that proper expertise and procedures can protect us from the ultimate unknown. The Vatican's secret demon classification system is just one example of the hidden knowledge that religious institutions have been gathering and guarding for centuries. There are countless other mysteries locked away in church archives, and religious vaults around the world, knowledge about miracles that couldn't be explained, investigations into supernatural phenomena that were never made public, and documentation of encounters with forces that challenge everything we think we know about reality. If you found this exploration of Vatican demonology as fascinating as I did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Sigil Sanctum. We specialize in uncovering the religious mysteries and esoteric knowledge that institutions prefer to keep hidden from public view. from secret Vatican investigations to forbidden monastery texts, from suppressed miracle reports to classified religious encounters with the unexplained.